We have an exciting team of 3 presenters today to talk about interfacing with automated stores. Vlad Lebedev is our chief architect. He'll provide an overview of the objectives and strategy for interfacing Limfinity with automated stores. And Richard Peck will actually demonstrate and show you our Limfinity interface with the Berks automated stores. Richard is our technical implementation lead on the informatics team. And then Fedor Bokov, our principal software engineer, will provide a deep dive into the code to show you how the underpinnings of the automated stores interface works. Vlad?
Thank you, Cheryl. A couple of months ago, we talked about integration and integration capabilities of Limfinity platform. And you might remember this slide. Specifically, we talked about how can we integrate with the big automatic robotic stores. So today we want to show you one implementation that is quite unique, and I think this is be a very interesting presentation. The store that we integrated is made by Brooks Life Science. It's called BioStore 2, minus 80 degrees Celsius. This storage systems, they usually came in one of 3 configurations: single bank, twin bank, or quad bank. The store that we integrated is actually quad bank, and the customer has 6 of those quad banks. So realistically, we're looking at somewhere around 20 million samples total in the system. We used the middleware that came with the robotic store. It's called Strata, and for interface with Strata, we used the REST APIs. One of the challenges was to replace existing LIMS, and we replaced it with Biobank Pro, which is a version of Limfinity configuration. So now all samples, all plates are stored on Limfinity. And again, we use Strata middleware to communicate with the store, with all stores from a single instance of Limfinity, central access to all 6 stores. What's nice about Strata that it came with a nice emulator that you don't really need a physical store to develop such integrations. And Strata provided clear documentation how to do those integrations. Everything came to either calling Strata APIs or subscribing to Strata notifications. We use 2 APIs in particular. One of them is to pre-register a plate of samples, and the second one is a call to process the order. Those are 2 very straightforward HTTPS REST-style calls. Additionally, Strata allows us to subscribe to notification APIs, and those notifications are related to plate status, plate loaded, plate retrieved, or order status changed. So with that, I don't really want to do any more slides and would pass to Richard so he can show you the system.
Thanks, Vlad. So if I just share my screen. So this is Biobank Pro instance, and this is the demo instance, not hooked up to the live store, but up to the emulator, as Vlad mentioned. So here we have an overview of the current store. We can see which trays and plates are loaded into the store, and it gives us the percentage, and we can drill down. It shows us the type of tray. As Vlad mentioned, the stores work on subscriptions. So what this means is that our LIM system or any other application has to register with the store to let it know that on any of the different events, when they happen, it can post a message out to the LIMs. So how we went about this, we actually have a way to add these subscriptions or open. So these are the active subscriptions. So the main thing here is it gives us control because it allows us to subscribe to specific events. So we may not want to know if everything's being unloaded or loaded or moved. So we can specify the specific events that we want to subscribe to. But it also allows us to have multiple stores. So you'll see here we have one for Quad Bank 2 and some subscriptions for Quad Bank 3. Now, as the other thing that Brad mentioned was we were taking this over from another LIMS. And one of the issues that we had with the previous LIMS was that the subscriptions would go stale. By this I mean if something happened within the store and it tried to post notifications a number of times and it didn't get a response, it would actually drop the subscription. But in the previous LIMS, this wasn't reflected, so you would log in and it would show as being as an active subscription. So what we've been able to do with Biobank Pro is we can come in and we can actually check the subscription in real time. So if we check the subscription here, it will check and it will say that the subscription isn't actually active. So, and if we wanted to, we could click OK, and this will actually now activate. Click on active, and this will actually activate our subscription, which means that we will now get those notifications from the store. So this was the first thing we had to achieve, so that we would start to receive notifications. The next thing that we had to understand was how the user wanted to load boxes into the store. The store has two ways of storing samples. So we have a HD tray, which is a very large honeycomb style tray that we can put a large amount of samples in, or it can store the samples in their 96 well boxes. So if we come back to our diagram here, what we see is this is one of our HD trays. So this will show us exactly what samples are in which position in our HD tray. As you'll see, they're very large. But also, when we create a box in Limfinity, we needed to know if the box needed to be reformatted from its 96 well box. Go to edit box, you'll see here we can reformat now. We can mark the box as pickable, or we can mark the box as not pickable. So what this means is that when we load this box into the store, if it's set to reformat, it will take all the samples from the 96 well box and it will put it onto that HD tray to save space. If it's pickable, it means that the customer wants to be able to pick individual samples from that box. So the box will stay in this SD format, but in the future we may want to cherry pick specific samples from it. And then the third option was not pickable, and this means that the box will always stay in that format with the same samples in it. So the only way we could pick from this box is to remove the whole box. So if we then wanted to send a box to the store, so if we wanted to send this box, we have had it set up so that when you create the box it will trigger a message that will be sent to the store that will register it. But we also have a manual way to do it as well, just in case, like in this instance, we needed to do it outside of that routine. So if we click on our registering store, we can now select the store that we want to send it to. In this case, we'll send it to QB2. If we click on OK, this will now actually send the information to the store. And if I refresh this, we see that this box is now registered with the store, and all the tubes are here. So because this is an emulator, it's slightly different. But what this would simulate now is somebody opening the hatch and loading the boxes into the store. So what we see here, this is the emulator. This is our new rack. So the store will pick it up. It will place it into a temporary location. It will then scan the box, take it out, and put it into a proper location. As I said, if this was set to a HD, it would then reformat the box. So this is how we've registered our subscriptions, so that we know we've subscribed to the different events. We have set or configured it to deal with the box in different ways. So then The next thing that we wanted or needed to look at was how to retrieve samples back from the store. So this was done by way of pick orders. So what we can do is we can create a pick order. So we can give it a specific name. So if this was for a customer, we could put the customer's name and maybe date here. We could put a brief description, and we could put a pick type. So if it was a box or an aliquot, and then we would say which freezer it was from. So say freezer 2. So when we've created this, we can then add our aliquots to the pick order. So this should give us a list of all the available aliquots that are registered as being in QB2. So we could select a number of these aliquots or boxes. We can click on OK, and then these are now on this pick line. So if we click onto here, we can review them. And then once we're happy that all of our samples are on our pick order, we can click Send to Store, and this will send the request to the store. The store will pick the samples, and then it will output them for the user to pick up from the I/O. And I think that's the main areas that we integrated with. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, this is Brandon. I do have a question. We often get into discussions about a hybrid storage solution, meaning a customer that can store both samples in a store on site, but also with our off-site services.
Yes.
What can a customer get out of that we can offer? How can they see their different collections? How's that dashboarded?
Okay, so there's a number of ways we could do this. We could have manual freezers, so we could have freezers on site and off site. Does the off site storage tell us where the samples are being stored within the freezers, or does it tell us the freezer ID?
Well, this would be in Indianapolis, for instance, as an example.
Sure. Okay. So the thing with Biobank Pro is it does give us a nice overview of different freezers when this loads up. So it allows us to track exactly where our samples are. The main thing is that if we log in and we're searching for a sample, if we can tell it that it's in an off-site storage, or it's in another storage in Indianapolis, it's much easier to find. So if we click on this, for example, this will give us a breakdown of exactly. So we could have our off-site storage freezers broken down like this, so we could see where the samples were at any time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Richard, thanks for a nice presentation. This is Christopher Dubay. I was curious, the automated store, it looks like it's interfacing with more than one system. How many systems does this automated store interface with?
So the automated store, so it has a database behind it that it saves its information to, and it has the firmware on the actual store as well. So Strata is the middleware that talks to the database and to the firmware on the store. So from a Biobank Pro point, we integrate with Strata, and Strata communicates with the store and the database for the samples.
Correct. I was just curious, is the automated store interfacing with other systems as well as this LIMS, or is this the sole system it interfaces with?
Oh, sorry. So in this case, for this customer, we are still running both LIMS systems in parallel, so we can interface with multiple LIMS systems if it needs to. And this is whilst we're migrating the data into Biobank Pro and cleaning it up. As you can imagine, when they have around 12 million samples, it's quite a lengthy process. But yeah, so in this case, this store integrates with two different LIMS systems.
I bring it up because it's kind of a unique situation where one device is used by many LIMS, and it's kind of interesting.
It's been challenging.
Thanks
the
very much. Very nice.
The other thing here is we can also have a graphical representation of the type of samples that are in our stores and things like this. It's a nice feature. Were there any other questions around the integration with Strata or the stores generally? Great. Okay. So, Freda, I guess it's over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, this is Fedor. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm gonna show how this integration is implemented at the level of the code. So Limfinity and Strata software, they interact with each other via RESTful web APIs, which both of the systems have. Limfinity makes API calls to Strata to register boxes, submit orders. There are two types of orders, sample pick orders and tray output orders, and to manage subscriptions to events. In Limfinity, we have a couple of helper scripts, about 10 helper scripts involved in this integration, all prefixed with Strata namespace. And we have modules or helper scripts for corresponding to each type of API call. So for example, to register boxes, we have this helper script, which is responsible for sending register boxes requests to Strata. For a pick order module is responsible for sending sample pick orders. And subscriptions module is responsible for managing subscriptions. Methods in these modules, let me open, for example, register boxes. It's not just a helper script, it's a helper script containing Ruby modules. And in each of these modules, we have one or more methods, like, for example, method submit pre-register request or register box in all freezers. And these methods are used everywhere throughout the system, in tools, other scripts. Basically, whenever we need to submit, whenever a box is modified, whenever we need to submit updates about boxes to Strata, we call this method from tools or what these methods actually do, how they're implemented. Well, all of these modules which make API calls include common shared helper script with web services helper module. That module is responsible for actually properly formatting the request. Let me open it. For formatting the request, sending that request to Strata web API, processing the response, and authentication. Authentication is handled via separate API call. So before making the actual API call with the payload, we have to make a separate API call to get authentication token. So we have a couple of methods here. The main one is this send request. It basically creates new HTTP request and submits that request and parses the response, and then returns parsed result back. So besides making API calls to Strata, as Vlad and Richard mentioned, we also handle events. There are three types of events: tray input event, tray output event, and order state change event. And we have modules corresponding to each event type here. These modules are responsible for handling the actual event payload and processing it. But these events are submitted to Limfinity through our web API. And we have this Strata event handler helper script, special handler script, which is marked here, enable via API. So it basically acts as API endpoint on Limfinity side. In a single API call, Strata can send multiple events, so that's why we have a loop here. And we basically pass each event to generic event processing script, Strata events, handle event method, which demultiplexes that event, extracts all the information from it, extracts event type, finds and loads concrete event handler module for that event type, and forwards basically that event to concrete event handler module. And we have three of those event handler modules for each event type. In each of those event handlers, we have handle event method, which is actually being called, and it does all the processing here. So how it actually works altogether, all the components and modules, how they are used throughout the system. So it all starts with registering boxes. So as I said earlier, this register box in all freezers method is called in all places basically in the system where we modify box, where we add samples to a box or remove samples from a box. At the time we update, we call this method to update box plate map, box information in all freezers and in all stores. And there can be more than one stores. Single instance of Limfinity can work with many automated stores. We always send updates to all of them. And after all stores have the information, the actual plate maps, you can physically take any box and go to any of the automated stores and physically submit that box to automated store, to any one of them. At that time, the store will generate a tray input event and send it to us. Our tray input event handler, it extracts barcode of the tray, barcode of all boxes on the tray, and barcode of all samples and aliquots from this event. It finds corresponding subjects in the database and updates the status. It sets storage location to point to the freezer, to the actual store to which this box was put into. And it updates workflow states on a box and on all specimens and aliquots samples in that box. And at the end, it also notifies user interface via WebSocket to reload open box viewers if there are so many viewers displaying box content, they will be automatically refreshed to display information about store and updated statuses. Now, when we want to pick some samples or boxes from a store, pick orders are submitted via this Strata pick order script. So Richard showed you how it looks in UI. Basically, select what you want to pick from which store, and those tools call this submit order request method in pick order module, and it formats the request for the store for Strata software and basically sends this request with barcodes of either individual samples or boxes which need to be picked, and it sends it to the store, to Strata software. Orders can take a long time to actually process. So this is, we do not wait for the results here. We just submit the order, and the actual processing is handled asynchronously. When store, for example, when the pick order was for individual samples, store first locates those samples and moves them to new boxes and put those new boxes onto trays, empty trays. When those trays are ready to be taken out of a store, store sends order state change event to us. This event is handled by the Strata events order state change event handler. It basically extracts barcodes of trays which are ready to be taken out of store, and it sends separate request to Strata at the end, tray output request, because store does not automatically output trays. It just notifies us with the state change event that the tray is ready. Then this event handler sends separate tray output request to a store, and processing is also asynchronous. We do not wait for the result here. We just submit request, and that's it. When the actual tray will be outputted by a store to input-output module, we will receive another notification, another event, tray output event. And tray output event handler extracts barcodes of tray, boxes on that tray, and the samples, individual samples from that event notification. And again, it finds all those subjects in our database, subject corresponding to box, to tray, and to individual aliquots. And it updates workflow statuses on those subjects, removes location information, like the storage location, for example, is removed from a tray to indicate that it's no longer in store. And at the end, it also sends notification to UI to update box viewers if there are any viewers open for these boxes. And basically, that's it. That's all I wanted to show.
Anybody have any technical questions?
I'm sorry, further, this is Mikhail. Could you please explain what happened if you want to add a new automated freezer to the system? First of all, does this automated freezer send some information about number of boxes, trays, and so on? And second question, how you feel Limfinity database? I mean, if we have already filled automated freezer with some samples, we need to move this data into the Limfinity. How you doing that?
Well, to your first question, when new store is registered, we currently do not retrieve any information about existing boxes already present in the store. How that part was handled in actual installations, in actual projects, maybe Richard would be the better person to answer the question. But on technical side, when new store is registered, the only thing we have to do in Limfinity is to register for subscriptions. And we have user interface for automated stores. When new store can be registered, subscriptions can be registered. Richard already showed that part. And at the technical level, it's handled by the Strata subscriptions module. There are methods to activate subscription, cancel subscription, and check subscription status. These methods just make API calls to Strata to do corresponding action.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Second question is also better. Richard probably would be the better person to answer that.
Sure, yeah. So one of the challenges that we had was the old limbs actually stored the data in a different structure than Limfinity. So part of the progress that we had to do was actually map out the different storage structures of the different limbs, and when we extracted the data from the previous limbs, we then imported it into that Limfinity with the correct module, so all the samples were updated. But we also had a number of samples that were already in the store, so we could update those as well by either adding them to the store, or, as I said, importing the data in the new structure to reflect where they were. And this would work because how the subscriptions work is on the event change or on the output order. When we receive the order, Limfinity actually, or Biobank Pro, searches the inventory, and if the samples exist, it updates them accordingly, and if they don't exist, it doesn't update them. As I said, when we were dealing with two different limbs and migrating from one to the other, this was quite an important requirement, because there were a number of samples in the old limbs that we hadn't yet put into the new Limfinity system. So does that help? Essentially, we had to map the structure of the freezers and then import them and update the data in Limfinity.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Christopher. Just had a quick question. Is there any plan to put Limfinity inside the automated store?
I don't think at this time we have any plans for that. Dave
Thanks.
is on, but
The question. You mentioned processing can be kind of slow. How long does it take if you ask for a sample to have it pop out?
is that from a Strata perspective, or you mean from the UI request?
I was just thinking in the workflow. No, I guess from physical perspective, how long for a store takes to process the order?
So it depends on the size of the store. One thing that we were able to do, and again, a lessons learned going from the old limbs to a new limbs. The old limbs, it used to store the data for the plates or the boxes within its own database, and the Strata or the store actually had to query an external database. This took a very, very long time for it to, because as the plate goes in, it's put into a temporary storage. It's then taken out and scanned as a QC step. So the store has to, or Strata has to validate all the samples in the plate match what should be there. And when it was scanning 6 boxes on a tray and having to read the data from an external database, this was taking an awfully long time. So what we were able to do with the Limfinity implementation, by posting the data to the Strata database, we increased or decreased the amount of time it took to retrieve the data for the samples by a significant factor, and it was allowing Strata was able to find the data for the samples much quicker and process the samples much better.
Great, that's interesting. Thank you.
Chris, sorry, this is Clay Angeli. A question to your question about, do we have plans to include Limfinity within a store. Could you elaborate a bit on what value you see in that, trying to understand a use case from your perspective?
Oh, it was much more of a curiosity type thing, that it's not a specific use case. It just seemed to me that the store already has a sample management system inside of it. And it's almost like one sample management system talking to another. So I was just thinking of making the same sample management system. But
Okay, yeah, that makes sense in principle for sure. It's Strata is an existing system to manage, the samples within the scope of that particular store, whereas Limfinity, has a much broader scope and applicability. So I could see us at some point perhaps maybe bundling, with the purchase of a store, a bundle offer to have, but we would still have Strata, driving all of the governance and the source of record for where samples are within the store itself. But I could see a potential for perhaps bundling Limfinity, in a commercial model with a store for certain applications on a customer, by customer basis.
yeah, and it would also be really cool to see robots moving around inside of Limfinity. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, that would be totally doable.
Any other questions? No, thank you for attending today. Appreciate Vlad, Richard, and Feder doing the presentations on automated stores. Just want to remind everybody that if you have a topic that you would like us to cover, please send your email to Monica Hauser, and she'll coordinate presentation of that topic. Again, thanks to everyone for attending the Limfinity developers webinar. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.